What does it look like to be a follower of Jesus? And one of the answers was that you need to be growing or maturing. And so I said, okay, well, where in the Bible do we learn about what it means to grow and mature in Jesus? You know, obviously the answer is all through the Bible. You can find the answer way back in the Old Testament, and all through the Gospels and into the letters. But one specific letter was written by James, who we think, and there's a number of James in the Bible, because it was a pretty popular name, but we think it was the brother of Jesus, and he grew up with Jesus, and obviously didn't know that his brother was God's son, and was the Word, and was with God, and was God. He just thought he was his older brother. But at some point, Jesus came to John, and there was a conversation that left John knowing that his brother Jesus was God.
I mean James.
James, sorry. John was popping into my mind as another familiar name. So at some point, James knew that his older brother was God. Wouldn't that would be kind of crazy, right? You just finally, you've had your brother your whole life, and he's been like this perfect kid, which is bad enough to have a perfect older brother, and you probably never measured up. It's kind of like Nathan. He's like our perfect child, right? Almost. But Jesus was perfect. And so finally, one day, Jesus explains to James, I'm perfect because I'm God. So that had to, really kind of, okay? And then all of a sudden, he had to believe, too. So he became, what the Bible says, one of the pillars of the church. And the church was first formed in Jerusalem. And then from Jerusalem, that's where it spread. That's where we get from Jerusalem to Samaria to the outermost parts of the earth, right? So the church was birthed in Jerusalem, and James, the brother of Jesus, was one of the pillars, one of the lead guys. So whenever something happened, they would always go back to James and say, okay, here are all the facts. This is what everybody thinks. These are all the various positions that everybody is taking. What do we do? That's a pretty important position. And they acknowledged him as the leader of the church. And so I think it's a pretty good place for us to go and read his letter so that we can understand what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus that's maturing. Because in a short amount of time, he became a very important person in the church. So he had to mature and grow up very quickly in what it looked like to be a follower of Jesus, to be a Christian. And so I'm just going to review really the 5 chapters today and encourage you this week to read those 5 chapters. It's probably only 5 or 6 pages. So let me start by reading James 1. James, a bond servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. We could probably do a month-long series on that one half of that one verse. To the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad, greetings, salutations. Hello, I send my regards to you. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter the various trials like we face now in the United States of America and around the world, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. This word perfect here is not perfect meaning sinless, but perfect in your pursuit of being like Jesus. Perfect in your following of Jesus. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without doubting, for the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For the man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. So James wants you to understand that he has become a bondservant. And that word translated means one who has willingly given their life to another. And many of you may know the story, but in order to mark, the mark of a bondservant was a piercing through one's ear with an awl or the door hinge, the hinge of a door. They would pull the hinge of the door out of the master's house. The owner of the house would pull the hinge out, and they would drive that pin through the person's ear. And that would mark him as having willingly given the rest of his life to the owner of that house. He's basically saying, this marks me as yours. I am going to serve you with my life forever. And that's what it means to be a bondservant. So that's when he says, I'm a bondservant of Jesus Christ, that simply means I've given Jesus, my older brother, who used to drive me crazy, my life. And he was martyred. It's not in the Bible, but it's kind of based on some church history and some church writings that the Jewish leaders of the day that were high up in the Jewish church saw him as a threat and beat him to death with clubs.
Wow.
So he, along with all the other disciples, were either crucified or beaten or stoned to death. So these guys were, when they said, I'm a follower of Jesus, what that meant was, I'm going to die following Jesus. That's what it meant. And so that first little half a verse says a lot, right? It says, I'm basically going to die following Jesus. And probably sooner than later. And so he knew he only had a short amount of time to be used by God in order to spread the truth throughout the whole known world. We kind of get complacent around here because we do have TV, we do have our sports, and we do have all these other things that we enjoy. And it's fine to enjoy these things as long as we know that we have a limited amount of time to share that joy of Jesus with others. So when we're playing soccer, when we're working, when I'm playing golf, sure, making a good shot on the golf course is part of being on the golf course, right? But what's more important is making sure that those three other guys that are with me know that the joy in me is not that I made a good shot. The joy in me is Jesus. And so somehow or another, Jesus will take an opportunity and he will share himself with others. So it's not me kind of beating them over the head with my golf club, right? You have to believe in Jesus, which is kind of what I want to do, right, Carlos? It's making myself available to the point that Jesus is my life and that he speaks through me. It's given him the opportunity. So I have to take my mind and my emotions off of myself for Jesus to have an impact on someone else, right? That's kind of the struggle that we all are in right now, because we all kind of start thinking about ourselves. And this world teaches us and trains us from an early age to think about ourselves. And James knew he had a short amount of time to think about Jesus. So for the next 5 weeks, we're going to be summing up the 5 chapters. The first chapter summed up is, he is patient in testing. So we've already asked for patience today. Well, that's what James is saying. That Jesus will show you how to be patient in your testing, because we're all being tested. The next chapter we'll look at is he practices the truth. A follower of Jesus will practice the truth. And I was talking to Joshua earlier, and I said, Joshua, does that mean that you're always going to tell the truth to mommy and daddy? And he said, no. I go, we don't expect you to always tell us the truth. But we do expect you to be willing to practice to always tell us the truth. You see the difference between that? We're going to fail. We're going to sin. We're going to slip up. And one of the things that the kids do is they don't want to get in trouble, so they tell us a little white lie, if we could kind of make light of lying. How about that? Lying is a sin, no matter how little or how big. And we can't expect Joshua, who's 9 years old, to be perfect. But when James says in this verse, so that you may be perfect and complete, it means that you are practicing, or that you are trying to be perfect. You are allowing Jesus to perfect you. And that when you do say a lie, or when you do sin, you acknowledge it. So you continue to practice. I don't hit perfect golf shots. I might hit, out of 80-something shots around, I may hit 4 or 5 that you just go, wow, that was really felt good. Or you don't always kick that perfect goal, right? How many times? What is the score of a soccer game usually? 40 to 30? 1-0, 2-1. 4 to 5 is a big score, right? How long are they playing soccer? For like an hour plus? You never know when a soccer game's going to end, do you? Who knows when the soccer game's going to end? It's like, I don't know, someone's keeping the clock and it just kind of keeps going, right? Well, that's like life. Only occasionally do you really hit the goal, or do you hit that perfect shot, but you keep trying, you keep practicing. And that's what I think a follower of Jesus does, is they keep trying, they keep practicing, they keep trying to get better, they keep trying to become more like Jesus, right? A follower of Jesus, in the 3rd chapter, has power over his tongue. How many times have you said something you wish you could put back in your mouth? A lot. All the time. Right? Okay, we'll talk about that. I don't need to go any further there. The 4th chapter is that a follower of Jesus is a peacemaker, not a troublemaker. And you 4 kids like to get trouble going. You're pretty good at it. And the smarter you are, the easier and more subtle it is to cause trouble, right? Yeah. You're our oldest and most perfect child, but you're also pretty smart and know how to cause a little trouble from time to time, right? I'm being funny right now. You can laugh. All right. We all cause trouble, right? So we kind of dig at each other, at our relationships, at our brothers and sisters, at our spouses, at our friends. There's always a dig that kind of comes out. And that gets back to the tongue. But we're to be peacemakers. We're to encourage each other. We're to always look for the good in each other. So that's week 4. Week 5, we become more and more prayerful. A follower of Jesus becomes more and more prayerful in troubles, in times of trouble. And you know what? I might pick up on these other questions next week, because we've already covered a lot of ground and done an overview of what we're going to be talking about for the next month. So I think you guys get the idea that if we claim to be a follower of Jesus, we're basically giving up our lives as we know it, right? And we're saying, put the awl through my ear. Mark me